when you're not a seasoned professional on anything, and I don't care if this is a firefighter, a race car driver, a doctor, if you're not conditioned to doing this type of activity or emergency or environment or procedure every day, you're going to open yourself up to panic. And everybody's going to do it. We all do it. I do it. We all have our own box of knowledge. And when we step out of that box, or that box collapses upon us, we panic because everybody likes to be in control. One thing that firefighters do to be able to remain in control is we train every day ad nauseum. We educate ourselves day in and day out just to keep our minds sharp, educated. We have contemporary educational resources that every day something changes. A new hazardous material comes up, a new car comes up, a new technology comes up that always keeps us changing and guessing as to what fire behavior is going to be like. That said, there are a couple conventions here that I want to talk about when it comes to vehicle fires. And there are some people out there that they're just whacked when they say this coach, gee, it's this kind of coach. This coach would never burn. That coach was too much money. That would never burn. Or shame on this person or shame on that person. I'm going to tell you, you're all screwed up in the head. I've gone on vehicle fires from anything from a beat up jalopy that's worth nothing to $100,000+ Rolls Royce and a supercar well above that. And the only thing that differentiates those is how hard the hood is to get in and how hard the windows are to break. That's it, folks. They're all made with same materials. In fact, I will tell you this, some of the supercars are made with even harder materials to extinguish. So yeah, they burn. They burn worse than the jalopy. So forget the closet experts that come out and say, well, gee, that $1 million motorhome shouldn't have burned. Okay, we're not casting judgment on the maker. We're not casting judgment on the cost of the motorhome. And we're not casting judgment on Andrew and Shay. What we're going to talk about is some things that will help prepare and educate you to have a plan. Okay, it's going to happen to everybody. I've had vehicle fires. You're going to have vehicle fires. If you live long enough and you get around long enough and you drive these things, I don't care if it's a car, a motorcycle, or a bus, a van, a truck. We have combustible products in these vehicles. And I don't care if it's gas, diesel, or electric. They all burn. So I'm going to go down what I saw in the videos, and I'm going to use that video as a talking point. I'm not going to spend a lot of time editing this because the point of this is to talk from my heart and with the resources I've had for over 40 years. And I'm going to speak candidly, openly, and pretty much off the cuff. Not scripted. I've got some speaking points, and if you have any extra questions, you can always put them in the comments below. You can message me. Most of you know how to get a hold of me anyway. On that, I'm going to put a link. If you haven't seen the video that Andrew sent out today to describe it, it's nasty. It's not an easy thing for me to watch because I know the emotions, and I know the emotions of the friend, and it affects me because I see the hurt. And nobody deserves that. So, and the reason why I don't want to watch that is because I too will get emotional about it. And so let's get back into the mechanical mode and let's talk education so I can snap out of the emotional part of it. First of all, the location of the fire. Hollywood makes exploding vehicles. Vehicles just don't explode. They catch fire. And if the fire does reach a combustible product like a gas tank, yes, you can have an explosion. They can explode the bumper systems. They can explode the tires just from air pressure alone. Cars just don't randomly explode. And so a lot of people have this Hollywood-esque type of vision that as soon as they see fire, they jump out of the doors because they think the vehicle is going to explode. And that just doesn't happen. But that said, the location of the fire, the combustible products that are used in motorhomes for decades are volatile. They're flammable, and they will lead to rapid combustion and fire spread. So if anything else, the overarching caution in this is you better have a game plan ahead of time. If you look at the fire, that fire was in the front of the RV. It was also broken through the windshield. And for a fire to break through a windshield, that's intense heat. And it also has some time to break through that. So in the initial phases of that fire, when they had pulled off the freeway onto that rest stop, you could see the fire was just breaching the front window. And I don't know why, I don't know the time frame at all, but that's just the normal progress of a vehicle fire. Even if it's in the engine compartment, it's going to take a long time to breach that windshield. Now in the case of an RV, you've got the windshield ahead of everything. Pretty much all the combustible items are behind the windshield of an RV, like a Class A bus. So what's up front? Well, you've got wiring, and you've got generator, and you've got combustible items in general. You've got flooring material, you've got fiberglass material, you've got glues, laminates, all sorts of different flammable products. From a firefighter's perspective, when you see the amount of volume and the amount of orange flame and you see the amount of dense black smoke, you're always going to assume that that's a petroleum-driven product that's burning. And that means it could be anything from a fuel that's flammable to a plastic that's flammable. So when you see a vehicle fire, you've got plastics, you've got rubber from the tires, you've got fuels, and they issue a ton of black smoke, dense carcinogenic black smoke that you don't want to mess with, you don't want to inhale, and you just can't get near it because it puts out an intense amount of heat. So the reaction time that you have to do anything is very, very limited compared to a burning ordinary combustion fire that would be wood structure that's going to burn and consume a little bit slower. Flammable liquids, flammable solids like a plastic, they burn very quickly and they're very volatile and they put out a lot of thermal energy. So in a motorhome, you've got all that going on. And with this video, you could see that the color of smoke was very indicative of just a classic vehicle fire. You got the generator. Generators in and of themselves, they're not going to burn up. They're a diesel motor. Diesel, as I showed in my previous fire safety video, it's a very stable fuel. At room temperature, it's just not going to explode. It's not going to even catch fire because diesel has a very high flammable flash point that you have to heat that up before it actually gets to the flammable point where you can actually put a flame to it and it'll actually sustain ignition, where at normal ambient temperatures of 70, 80 degrees, it's not going to be flammable if you introduced a flame to it. So generators obviously have heat going on, and when the generator is running, you've got exhaust, you've got a fuel pump that's driving that fuel under pressure. A generator also has an electrical stator in it, and point of maintenance, you always want to keep up with those generators to make sure that the stator is functioning correctly and you've run your generator and there's not a lot of oxidation that's happened from the thing sitting in salt air too long by not using it. So, but that's a different story and a different topic altogether. But that's another source of heat. That's another source of fuel. Now, the other part of that fire triangle is air. You need air supply. So I want to touch on that. Shay and Andrew had talked about smelling something and they saw a wisp of smoke coming in the duct. They did a great job. They thought immediately, we better pull over. Andrew also said he turned off the generator. Another good call, because in firefighting, when you're fighting a vehicle fire, you've got to at some point cut the fuel source off. And if it's a battery charged electrical problem, you got to cut the battery. If it's a fuel charged problem, you got to cut the fuel source off. Eventually we're going to cut all those sources off, but you've got to remove that fuel supply from the heat. You've got to move the heat from the fuel, and also you got to remove the air from those other two components. That's the whole principle about a fire triangle, is a fire needs those three components to work: air, fuel, and heat. Now, what I want to talk about is you have to think about that when you're driving a vehicle. If you're driving a vehicle down the freeway 60, 70 miles an hour, you're forcing a 60-mile-an-hour air supply into all sorts of closed spaces. If a fire is starting at its incipient phase and is sparking and smoldering and working on some flammable product, certainly running along at freeway speeds is not going to help at all. So they did a good job by getting off as soon as possible. And you think you've got a fire, you got to get off or pull to the side of the freeway immediately. Relax, just pull over and get yourself as safe as possible. And everyone's going to have to figure out how to get around you. Don't feel somehow that you've got to drive another 10 minutes while this smoke is happening or the fire is growing, that you've got to somehow get off the next off-ramp, all right? That's what we're here to do, okay? We respond in the middle of the freeway, the CHP will respond. They'll take care of the safety, but it's important for you to pull off and get yourself and get your products out. So another thing I want to talk about that wasn't mentioned, but it's a very big hazard, and that is when you pull over and your mind is racing and you've got smoke or you've got visible fire, you're not going to be thinking clearly. But I want you all to be thinking carefully about where you park and how you park your vehicle. Couple things. Get it in park or on a big rig, put it neutral, and set the air brake. Set the air brake, set the parking brake, because this happens far too many times. People panic, they leave the motor running, and they get out of the vehicle in neutral, or worse, they get out in drive. And now you've got a flaming vehicle continuing to drive away from them. It's brutally scary. It can cause more damage than just parking off the side of the road in the middle of the freeway. So get your wits about you. Pull over safely. Think, think, think. Turn the ignition off. Put it in neutral. Put it in park if you've got it. Set the parking brake or the air brakes. Get that vehicle stopped and stabilized. If you have to and you can't figure out how to set your brakes or something's malfunctioning, throw something under the wheel, okay? On the downhill side, get a rock, grab something out. If you've got the time to do it, grab something and chalk the wheels, because that could make a huge amount of difference as to the safety of everybody involved. So let's talk about the safety systems that Andrew had mentioned about. Having smoke detectors, having extinguishers. This is a whole completely different topic in itself. And I can't go into all the details of what it takes, but I will tell you this. Virtually every person grossly overestimates the efficacy of a normal handheld fire extinguisher. And very few motorhomes have a full-sized one like this, okay? A 2A 40 BC or a 2A 10 BC. That's this. This one has about anywhere, it depends on the actual size, anywhere from a couple to 5 pounds of agent in there. When you're in a controlled environment and you know what you're doing, these are brutally effective. But when you've got rip-roaring fire like Andrew and Shay did, you would have a dozen of these and you wouldn't be effective on that fire. That's a lot of fire. Now, that said, if you've got one of these and you can hit it right at its base of the flame, right at the ignition source, and you can cut that fuel source off, you're going to put your fire out and you'll be in great shape. So, by all means, have a bunch of these. The bigger the motorhome, the more of these you have. I've got 4 of these. I've got them all around the house. The other thing I want to tell you about is this is not a set it and forget it deal. Now, hopefully you can see that dial. That dial is on 0. There's no pressure in this extinguisher. So I use it for demonstration purposes, and it's of no use because it's lost its charge. And you have to maintain these extinguishers. You have to maintain your smoke detectors. You've got to test the smoke detector. You've got to change the batteries routinely. You've got to check your extinguishers. You've got to make sure they're charged up frequently. You've got to make sure that you rotate your extinguishers out. And sometimes these extinguishers expire. A lot of these they say, 5 years to replace them. In commercial institutions, we usually require that extinguishers are serviced every year. And that's to make sure that they're always up to charge and they've got agent and that somebody hasn't pulled the pin and gone out and squirted it unnecessarily. So it's part of a readiness program. But yeah, you should have extinguishers, and most of them are going to be an ABC, dry chemical extinguisher, which we'll use on a normal combustible product like wood and paper. It'll also fight a B and C fire, which B is flammable liquids, which is your diesel and your gasoline, and a C fire is electrical. You got to have extinguishers. You just have to know how to use them, and know how to use them before you have a fire. When you have a fire and you see your valuables going up, that's not the time to start reading the label. So learn how to use them ahead of time. You can go to a fire department and they actually give classes on these. So just prepare yourself ahead of time with anything. Let's talk about planning. You have to have a plan, and you have to always be thinking about what if. And that's a curse in itself for firefighters, is our mind is always thinking what if. And it's not a real comfortable thing when you're trying to relax and just have a good time. But the flip side is we're always thinking of the what if. What if this happens? What am I going to do? How am I going to protect my friends, my family, my loved ones, my valuables? And what I want to share with you is to make sure that you execute this plan, drill if you have to. Many people advocate going through this. Go around your RV, look at the safety systems, look at your extinguishers, quiz yourself, where are they? A lot of people have the crash hammers. Okay, that's that hardened metal tipped hammer, and usually has a razor blade so you can cut the seatbelt off, because windows are tempered and it's very hard to break the windows with even your elbow or your foot. But you take that little pick hammer and you whack that tempered glass and it'll shatter instantly. It doesn't work really good on a front windshield though, because the front windshield has a laminate in there that prevents it from doing just that, from shattering. So I would not recommend you practice the crash hammer. But if you got one, know where it is, know how to access it. It'll wake you up as how effective those are. But you need to have a plan on how you're going to get out of your vehicle or your motorhome. And I really want to harp upon that. That amount of fire that was in that front end, I can't even imagine if it was a front entry. God was with them. They had a mid-entry. And that mid-entry, that gave them an exit route. I'm not going to cast any prejudgment of, gee, what would have happened if it was a front entry? I don't know. Shay mentioned it, and I got chills. Thank God it wasn't at night. Okay? This is why you do need smoke detectors in an RV. Have them in the front, have them in the back. Okay? Make sure they're working. That's your early warning. You've got to make sure that you're able to be summoned as soon as possible. And a smoke detector will smell that smoke. It actually looks at it visually long before you can detect the problem. That's your key to getting out early. But if the chance of the fire cutting you off from your normal exit point happens, you need to have a plan B. Know where your escape windows are. Most RVs have escape windows or escape doors and escape hatches. Know where they are. If it's in the bathroom, open it up. Know how to do that. Figure out, gee, if my motorhome's on fire in the front and I've got an escape hatch above my shower, how am I going to get out of that? How are you going to crawl up the shower walls? People need to think about this. The other thing is think about what happens when you are out. A lot of people have termed what's called a go bag. And a go bag is all your quick and easy protective clothing wears in a duffel bag. And people can get very elaborate on these. Anything from shoes, gloves, hoodies, beanies, medications, flashlights, spare pair of glasses. Think about the fact that you're in the middle of nowhere and something happens where you've got to bail out. And you bail out and, gee, It's 15 degrees outside and you're sitting in your flannel pajamas and you're in bare feet and you're on the roadside. How decapitating would that be to be dressed in 15-degree weather with nothing but bare feet, no clothing, and no hood wear, no glasses, and no emergency things like even people put batteries in there and flashlights. Think ahead. Hate to say it, think worst case scenario. Look at Andrew. He said he grabbed 2 left shoes or 2 right shoes. Imagine if he couldn't have gotten those. You know, Shay had gloves. She might have gotten gloves from their basement. The firefighters might have given them a pair of gloves to sift through belongings, but just think ahead. Think worst case scenario. If it's 110 or 118 and you're out in the middle of the desert, you might think of even putting some water in there. Help is not always right around the corner. These rural areas, the fire department, the highway patrol, it would not surprise me to have 15, 20, or 30-minute response times out in the middle of nowhere. Think about what you're going to do in that up to half hour with no help. Half hour is a long time to be sitting out there in the middle of the night in 15-degree weather. So plan ahead and then think about where you're going to put that go bag. Now, a key point in Andrew and Shay's motorhome is if you notice the amount of devastation in the cab area was a total loss. And it was brutal heat. You could tell by some of the fire signs in there about how much heat ripped through that motorhome. There wasn't much chance for them to get out and grab anything. But let me suggest something. Just like fire extinguishers should be in strategic locations, so should your go bag. So think ahead. Well, where do I need shoes immediately to get myself out? But where does the go bag need? I would propose that maybe the go bag is in a complete different safe compartment, perhaps. Look at their bays. Their bays down below looked like were mildly affected by the fire. Certainly early on, they could have gone down below and, grabbed a go bag and had some belongings and some protective gear. And hey, you know what? Extra credit, maybe even some cash. Andrew said he was lucky. He had his wallet in his pants. Just think about that. Think of how devastating it would be. You're out there in the middle of nowhere and there's no help around and you need money. So think about that. Think about where to keep your valuables too. Many of us travel with safes. It's not a bad idea. A safe, a fire safe even. If you're going to travel with documentation, visas, passports, probably is not a bad idea. I personally, I don't really lock my stuff up in terms of valuables, in terms of money. I keep a safe for a gun, but I don't particularly keep my things fire safe. That's not that bad of an idea to protect your valuables when you're traveling, because you just don't know. And certainly if your vehicle catches on fire, if it's not something you can pull off really quickly, having it in a fire safe would afford you the best possibility of protecting something if the worst happens. You got to have a plan in place. You got to practice the plan. You always have to be thinking about it. Last, I want to say something that is super, super critical. And boy, in this day of technology, and it's just something I can't emphasize enough, is situational awareness. Know where you are all the time. And by that, I mean if you're going down the 10 or the 40 and you're going across middle America and something happens, how are you going to call for help? And more so, how are you going to tell them where you are? I think all of the phones now have the ability to drop a pin. They have the ability to open up a map, touch on the map, drop a pin. You can send a lat and lawn. There actually are police departments, highway patrols now that will let you text your location. I'm not going to go through this now, but there are ways to look at your compass on your phone. You can look at your map and you can see the latitude and longitude and give it to the first responders. And it seems like a lot, and yeah, it is a lot, but it can make all the difference in the world. You have GPSs. You've got Garmin GPSs, Rand McNally GPSs. Get in there and learn to see how you can find your location. I know that on our Garmin, it's an RV model Garmin, If you look at the map tile on the first page, at the bottom it actually says mile marker a lot of times. That can help the CHP, or we call it CHP in California, but the Highway Patrol. That can help. If you knew, well, I'm on I-40 and I'm at mile marker 142, that will help, and it will make all the difference in the world. So know where you are and just have that rolling around the back. And, ask your spouse or a riding partner, hey, quick drill. Where are we right now? Drop a pin. Pretend like you're calling 911. Have a backup plan. If the big if you can't call 911, then what? I hate to say it, but 911 can't get everywhere all the time. And it certainly can't get there on time all the time. So have a backup plan. Be self-sufficient. We all don't like to think about that, but not thinking about it doesn't make you any better prepared, nor does it stop the emergency from happening.